evening to everybody else. And thank you for joining me. And thanks to TransitCon for inviting me to be a speaker this year at TransitCon 2022. This is my first time presenting to a group of people virtually on a subject I care about quite a bit, which is people-oriented cities. And so to kick us off, what I'd really like to do is just ground this conversation in a couple things. First of all, this is a presentation about one mayor's experience, one city's playbook, but a combination of ideas, philosophies, policies, infrastructure improvements, and other things that we hope will be examples that maybe are familiar to many of you, and some that perhaps are new. And our goal today is to talk about how the interconnectedness of those things is necessary to deliver fully people-oriented cities, something that I know everybody in attendance today is really looking to do. So I'm going to figure out now how to do this. Great. So first, to just level set for us, we need to improve safety. So just going to have a couple slides about what's the statement of our problem here. So traffic fatalities, as in the United States, are a massive public health crisis. They affect all types of road users, and it really needs a concerted response. We have over 1 million lives every year lost globally from traffic crashes. And in 2018, the last year with fully complete data, we have over 100 people losing their lives every day on a road in the United States. And in particular, that third item there, pedestrians killed in the United States, over 6,374 people who are using our streets as non-bicyclists and non-vehicle commuters lose their lives every year to traffic violence in the United States. And just to provide some context for why this is really important in this conversation and centering cities around people-oriented policies and design, comparatively, there are 6,491 deaths from non-private plane airline crashes globally over the 14-year period of 2007 through 2020. So roughly the same number of people die in airline crashes across the entire world over a 14-year period. But when a plane crashes, the NTSB will send dozens of people to a scene, and they will conduct months of investigations into the cause of that crash. They will issue reports thousands of pages long, and they will testify for days in front of a federal safety board and sometimes even Congress. And when they've identified a cause, they'll issue guidance that will mandate changes to airlines everywhere and to the fleet. But by contrast, when a pedestrian or a cyclist is hit or killed by a motorist, a lane of traffic is sometimes closed as an inconvenience for 30 to 60 minutes. The time necessary to complete and to clear, as they say, the intersection, and motorists immediately return to that same intersection or street without any consideration for whether it is safe for additional pedestrians or cyclists to engage on it. And so what we've got is a significant problem about the threat to the safety of people who are the most vulnerable users of our city infrastructure. And drivers typically get to keep their licenses, even though they drive home from the scene of a crash. And so the federal government hasn't treated street safety the same way it treats other types of transportation safety. And what that often does is it leaves cities with the responsibility of figuring out how to improve upon safety in our communities. So pedestrian deaths are on the rise in the United States. And as you can see there, it's 50% higher than it was just 10 years ago for pedestrian fatalities in the United States. And so the problem has continued to grow, and there's a need for cities to take action in addressing this issue. So this troubling statistic is just one example of why focusing on people-oriented communities and development is so important. It's going to be part of what we talk about today. And my last slide to level set us is the importance of recognizing the impact on our Black, Indigenous, and other people of color who are serving as pedestrians. And this is a really gruesome statistic, but it's a really important one for us to share. Safe systems have to be developed, and this is really about confronting the legacy of structural racism. Well, why, do you might ask? Well, because we built freeways through Black and Asian neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods. We widened streets and created arterials that were designed to move vehicles quickly through neighborhoods where Black and brown children play and grew up. And this was all in an effort to accommodate largely white suburbia in the 1950s and 60s. And the legacy of these infrastructure developments and design continue to live with us today. And they continue to harm these same communities today because of the way we failed to address them. So equitable investments in addressing people-oriented communities is going to be a real big part of what we talk about. So people-oriented cities. So what are people-oriented cities? Well, people-oriented cities, my definition of them is that they're cities that are bikeable and walkable by people of all ages and abilities, that they prioritize people and community over vehicles. They invest in quality public transit options, support affordable housing and mixed-use development, and improve the overall quality of life by providing livability for residents and visitors alike. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. So then how do we do that, and what are we going to deliver? So if you actually build people-oriented cities, you deliver safety, affordability, accessibility, equitability, support for all ages and abilities. And courtesy for that photo to Bike East Bay, one of our great advocate organizations out here in California. And it's really important to note, as we're going to go into the following slides, that it's not a single policy or a project or program that will deliver the answer. There's a full playbook. It's a combination of things that are interrelated that are going to help us actually make places people-oriented. Okay, so it's really important to recognize, even as transit advocates for safer streets, we talk about bike lanes, we talk about transit reliability, affordability. There are a combination of other things that expand beyond what we might think of strictly as transit space that are necessary to ultimately achieving the real vision of a people-oriented community. Okay, so the first topic that I want to kind of talk about and exemplify, and again, this is just one city's model. It's not meant to, it's not city erasure. Your city is not being ignored or silenced, and this is by no means a complete playbook that couldn't be appended to or added onto. It's designed to be something that's complementary to the things that other communities are doing. So the first thing is free and affordable transit. So in Emeryville, we're one of the few communities in the United States that actually has a free transit system. So the Emery Go-Round is a fully free transit system. You can ride it. It's operated in partnership with local businesses, formed through what's called a parcel-based improvement district, or PBID for short. All the property owners in the city pay an annual assessment on their tax bill to the Emeryville Transportation Management Authority, which operates this free shuttle. It has 3 routes that move throughout our city, and residents, employees, and visitors alike all take the Emery Go-Round during the day: shops, jobs, regional transit connections, their own homes, via this service. Prior to COVID, in 2018, this service and this shuttle provided 1.3 million trips a year. Now, to provide context, this is a city that is 1.2 square miles and has 12,000 residents. So we had 1.2 to 1.3 million trips in 2018 on a free shuttle. So when people talk about the free or affordable transit, if you provide it, people will take it. And our city, by doing that, has dramatically reduced the demand for vehicles, both within our community and for people coming to our community who would rather have the luxury of taking transit affordably and reliably into our city to their work or for their recreation or shopping needs. Second program we operate is something called 8 to Go. 8 to Go is a transportation service that the city funds in partnership with the Alameda County Transportation Commission. It's available to residents over the age of 70 without any restrictions. And for people who are 18 to 69 years old, if you are eligible for paratransit services, you can access 8 to Go through our city. We have about 300 residents in our city who rely on this as their primary source of transit. So it's basically the cheap and reliable alternative to an Uber. It is a $1 shuttle. So the shuttle will take you anywhere within our zip code, including North Oakland, West Oakland, and South Berkeley. It will take you to 4 regional medical centers or to BART, so connect you to regional transit if you're desiring to do that. And we fund that through a combination of local funding and grants we receive from the county's Measure BB, which is a voter-approved initiative here in Alameda County to support programs and projects. And we leverage that those funds for our city to make sure that seniors can live independently, age in place, and be part of the community at the same time. Another project we have here in our city is our free student transit pass program. So helping people understand the value of transit begins when they're young. And so in Alameda County, the Student Transit Pass program began in its first year as a pilot, where there were a series of 9 schools that were given access to free transit for the whole year to their entire middle school and high school student bodies. And it was so successful that we have slowly expanded it. And after the third year, we now are in all 15 school districts in the county, and 89 schools participate, including Emory Unified. So every student Emory Unified is eligible to get an unlimited Clipper card, which lets them access any of the regional transit agencies so that they can come to and from school, attend extracurricular activities, or participate in social events with their friends on the weekend, as well as going to part-time jobs. This is a freedom, essentially a freedom key for a lot of people in our community who otherwise would have to rely on parents or would lack the resources necessary to attend or participate in these types of programs. And then I just want to shout out what these are all connected to. So bigger picture, free and affordable transit is a last mile solution that also connects people to our regional transit agencies, like in our case, BART, and our partners at the Alameda Contra Costa Transit Authority, AC Transit. So our regional bus and BART services are the beneficiaries of that free transit pass program. And we have students who get to learn how to access and use those larger transit network systems at an early age. And I have to give a little shout out to the Alameda County Transportation Commission for helping coordinate and fund some of these programs. And just a thank you to the members of the commission who this past Thursday voted me in as the chair of that commission. So we're looking forward to doing a lot of new transit items in Emeryville. So next thing that's in the playbook is how do you prioritize pedestrians? Pedestrians, there's a lot of things that you can do to assist pedestrians, and this is in a policy and an infrastructure space. So our city has taken the lead on a number of items. So first of all, why do we always prioritize the transit infrastructure around vehicles? If we want to actually have people-centric cities, we should start with people. So we have eliminated buttons in our city. The fact that you have to wait at an intersection and press a button and wait for the little white man to appear on the screen to walk, and the cars are default getting a green and a red signal. We actually now have the system set up so that the lights in the city all activate for walks, and the left turns have to wait for the pedestrian signs, even if there isn't one there. So it reprioritizes and changes the way in which people think about the city, and it allows them to have greater access to the routes that they choose to use. And then we've done a number of things along some of our paths, which I'm going to talk about a little more in a couple slides. But there are other policies that we have in the city that we have found have been really advantageous to helping get more people out of their cars. So advanced walk lights, actually allowing walk lights to turn on before lights turn green for traffic that moves in the same direction, gives pedestrians a head start in safely moving into an intersection. We have Hawk Beacon over San Pablo Avenue near our school, which creates greater awareness for drivers who are paying better attention to lights overhead than they are to lights on the side of the road or people at the street level. It gives us an opportunity to improve safety for our safe routes to schools programs. We've been adding speed tables and raised crosswalks at all of our bike ped crossings along our trails so that motorists who cross those trails have to slow. We've also done narrowing at those places where we've added bollards and bulb outs so that as vehicles approach pedestrian and bicycle trail crossings, their vehicles slow. We even have speed cushions in front of several of them. We've done daylighting, so we've removed trees, vegetation, other things that, and including parking spaces at places where there are junctions between automobile-centric paths and crossings for our greenways or trails, so that there's greater visibility for motorists to see the people who are using those trails. We also added flashing sensor lights. So if you bike down the Emeryville Greenway, for example, about 100 feet before you reach a crossing, the motion sensor picks you up and it activates flashing beacons that alert motorists that a pedestrian is coming. And there is a sign that tells the motorist that the pedestrian and the bicyclist have the right of way at the crossing, so that drivers are both being narrowed, they're getting daylighting, and they're getting an advance warning that a person who has the right of way to that crossing is approaching. And then we're also going to be engaging with a new law that was passed this past year in speed limit reduction. So cities are going to have greater authority over speed limits, and speed limit reduction has been shown to actually reduce pedestrian fatalities and deaths. So we will be doing some additional work on that. And last thing in this space for prioritizing pedestrians is diverters. The more you move vehicles off of streets, the fewer vehicles there are at intersections, which in Alameda County, about 73% of people who were struck by a vehicle were actually struck in a crosswalk at an intersection. So crosswalks and paint are not safety solutions. We have to do other things to make intersections safe for pedestrians, and diverting vehicles away from routes or roads that are oriented around pedestrian movement is an easy way to help provide that safety. Okay, the next slide is building car-free spaces. So it's great to, my little thing is gone here. It's great to build car-free spaces, but then when it comes time to, I'm sorry, pedestrian spaces, but when it comes time to eliminating cars, what are we going to do to help ensure that there are fully functioning multimodal opportunities that do not require a vehicle? So the Emeryville Greenway was first planned in the early 2000s. The goal was to create a north-south bike ped route through the city that would be a safe space that prioritized the movement of pedestrians and cyclists on a fully car-free or car-reduced route. The creation of this single route became the genesis for the development of additional ideas, projects, and programs that connected to it. The front doors of many residential homes line the Greenway. The space is an active transportation refuge. There are 3 distinct sections to the Greenway. So this is a map of the city. You'll see the very northeast corner of the city. The Greenway leaves and connects to the Berkeley 9th Street Bike Boulevard. And then down at the very southwest corner of the city, the Greenway is very close to leaving and entering the city of Oakland, where it will connect to the Mandela Parkway bike lanes. And in Emeryville, some photos of the Greenway. So at the very northern end, like I said, it's very residential. It offers people a fully separated space path through the city. It connects people. It connects people to shops and restaurants. It allows people the opportunities to move for exercise and work reasons through the city. We have a lot of residents who live on the Greenway, who have jobs in Emeryville, who simply walk or bike to work because of the space that we've created for them. And there's been a lot of work on the Greenway in recent years. We've taken the portion of the Greenway in the middle where there are several blocks on Doyle Street, and we have prioritized and supported parklet programs to actually activate this space with more pedestrians and bicyclists and to remove spaces dedicated for cars for eating, shopping, and dining. We have recently in 2018, we opened Pellado Park, which is runs behind a series of bars and restaurants through the middle part of the Greenway's portion of track. And it offers people an opportunity to socialize in the evenings or after work, completely free from cars and parking adjacent to it. We just opened, as many of you probably know, the South Bayfront Bridge, and this is kind of the gateway to the southern third of the community. This bridge will actually be the first completely car-free bike and pedestrian crossing over the Union Pacific Railroad, which bisects our city and takes people into the Bay Street Shopping Center. The Bay Street Shopping Center will connect a lot of people to jobs and shopping, but we also have a proposal right now to add a grocery store to that shopping center, which means many people who live on the east side of the railroad tracks will now be able to go and purchase groceries in a completely car-free setting. And then finally, the Sherwin-Williams project, which is depicted here, the north on this project is oriented on the right side of the image, is going to be 500 new units of housing, a 2-acre park, community organic garden, and playground equipment that will front in a completely car-free space along the railroad track, 500 units of housing, including about 20% of them being affordable housing, so that people have the same experience on the north end of walking out their front door onto a bicycle pedestrian path instead of a parking lot or a garage. So what is the best practices for when it comes to doing projects? What do we need to do in the playbook to make sure that we can actually get what we want? So a lot of these things sound great, but how can we do it? What should we be doing? Well, one of the principles that we believe in Emeryville is do what is sustainable. So at the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of talk about safe streets and open spaces and creating spaces for people to move in a socially distanced manner outdoors. And a lot of cities in the Bay Area and elsewhere in the United States identified slow street programs. Some cities had miles and miles of streets that they were going to close off. And in some cases, without knocking any of those plans or programs, some of them were simply A-frame, like construction signs that were propped up, a few cones, a sign that said this is now a slow street. And we saw drivers whipping around them. We saw people taking the signs down, vandalizing them. The conflict between motorist mindset and safe active transportation space was really a challenge. And we got a couple calls. I got a couple calls from folks who wondered where our slow street program was. And we were actually engaged in a really deliberate and thoughtful process about what to do, with the goal being that we wanted to do something that would become permanent from day one. And so when we looked at it, the Emeryville Greenway, the 5 blocks of it that go down Doyle Street had become a bit of a a workaround for drivers who didn't want to deal with lights on Hollis Street, the parallel street that went north-south. So we saw a lot of drivers using it as a cut through. And that was a concern for us because Doyle Street is a barrier street between kind of the business section of town and the residential neighborhood. And the Doyle Hollis Park and one of our tot lot playgrounds is located on Doyle Street at a place where lots of children cross. There's the YMCA, the YWCA are located at 61st and Doyle Street. The city's only public housing building is located at 62nd and Doyle Street. And so we looked at this as an opportunity to provide age and accessibility to safer spaces, as well as equitable opportunities to improve the quality of life for people in our community, with making a project that would actually transform what people's understanding of the Doyle Street Bike Boulevard was. So when we began with it early in the pandemic days, we put up K-rails and Jersey barriers. We divided the street in half. One direction was allowed to remain car movement for most of the blocks, and the other direction was limited for pedestrians and bicyclists. We had situations with residents who tried to move the K-rails. We went door to door and had meetings with residents and business owners about why we were doing this. We educated people. We tracked how people were using it. We talked to people about using it. And then as soon as we put it in place and we saw how popular it was, and we got emails from residents saying, thank you for making this space larger and more accessible to us, we immediately began amending our plans for how to make this permanent. And so what we decided was that this was something that was manageable for us in terms of what we could actually transfer and deliver to the public as a long-term solution. And so we began the work immediately on designing a permanent solution for this street. And you will see here with some of these images kind of showing, we converted it into spaces where we closed 2 of the blocks completely. So on the left of this image is the Doyle Hollis Park and playground, and on the right behind the bushes is the 61st Street mini tot lot, which is for children under the age of 5. It's a fenced in playground area for small kids. And this was a block we decided kids should be able to move between these 2 parks freely. So we closed this block completely to traffic. At the north end of this stretch of road, we also closed the block where the Emeryville Greenway that you just saw images of connected to Doyle Street, so that there was no desire for vehicles to make turning movements at a place where bicycles and pedestrians were going to be moving in a linear motion. And by doing this, we actually disincentivized driving up Doyle Street altogether. So the middle 3 blocks of the street became essentially only places where the residents on those 3 blocks would use the one directional traffic. And we saw a massive decline in vehicle movement and delivery truck movement down the street. So we moved quickly. We partnered with the Alameda County Transportation Commission. We submitted designs within 6 months of starting this project for funding, and we decided to do a quick build. So we did a quick build where we implemented the plan we had for creating a fully pedestrianized space. And you have what you see there is the same block that was there just a couple pictures ago. And we turned it into separated cycle track and pedestrian walking space. And on my next slide, I'm going to actually show you. So within 12 months, Doyle Street went from a completely car-centric street to being almost completely car-free, with the exception of several northbound blocks of traffic for residents. So on the next slide, here is a video of what it's like to stand on Doyle Street today. All you hear is children. All you see is people out walking, taking their dogs, their kids to the playground. Totally different existence. I wish I had a video of Doyle Street before it had cars removed from it. But by doing that, I have people stop me on my own bicycle on Doyle Street. Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for this. I had a resident who is a member of one of the HOAs on that up that block tell me that his wife used to drive their children to childcare every day, and when the lane went in, he said, I put my kids in the cargo bike and I took them to childcare, and the kids loved it. And the next day was my wife's turn, and she went to put them in the car, and they said, no, we want to go in the bike. And so he ended up getting his wife to bike with him for several days before she realized this is actually, the kids love this and it's much better. And now their whole family bikes their children to childcare instead of driving, which is what they used to do. All right, let's see. So like I said at the beginning, it's not just about transportation infrastructure innovation. It's also about what you do with with housing. Housing is a necessary partner to transportation. So housing policy plays a major role in making cities more people-oriented, and poor housing planning and land use results in greater auto dependency. It creates greater economic disparity, and it results in a less equitable community overall, which depreciates safety for everybody. So good housing policy requires the 3 Ps, as we call it: production, preservation, and protection. And Emeryville is a leader in all 3 of these. So while the city doesn't build its own housing, we enact policies that stimulate housing production. Too many cities encumber the housing production process, with individual electeds often trying to change the affordability requirements or extracting concessions in exchange for their vote, reducing the size of a building, its height, its density. Don't get me started on shadow studies, and engaging in multiple rounds of appeals, often at planning bodies, before housing is approved, often resulting in it never being functionally built or becoming cost prohibitive for a developer to do. So we decided to change that. And so our planning and development regulations are very predictable. And I just have a snapshot of what one part of that looks like on here as a reference point. But we actually developed an entire planning set of guidelines in our planning and development regs, which establish an inclusionary requirement for affordable housing for any market rate housing. We have a that utilizes our bonus point system, which pretty much any project in our city has to. That affordable housing requirement matches the ratio of what we need for our regional housing needs allocation. And for those who aren't from California, every city has got a certain number of units that are market rate, and then each of the lower BMR rates that they have to approve. We actually just decide, rather than allow developers to pick who they'll house, we actually require that their affordable housing come to us in a ratio that matches the socioeconomic status and level of income that the region has told us we need to provide for in order to ensure we're equitably providing housing for everybody. So we have these guidelines in place. They're predictable. We streamline the development process this way, and so projects that are proposed in our city can get approvals in less than a year easily. We're a strong supporter of State Senate Bill 35, which made ministerial a lot of housing approvals in the city. And we've had several low-income housing projects approved already by the use of SB 35, which saves them costs. There's other things that the city has done to incentivize housing and housing development policies. So we've got other things that we do to provide for housing over cars. So we eliminated parking minimums in our city for all residential construction. We've also greatly reduced the ratios of allowed parking for non-residential parking. We require private bike parking per unit plus guest spaces for every residential unit that's constructed in the city. And most of our buildings now have locked bike rooms where bikes are stored, not in someone's unit, but in a protected storage space. So more and more people are actually bringing bikes because it's right there and it's convenient and it's part of their lease agreement. The city upzoned our transit corridors in 2019, and I'm very excited to say I anticipate we will be upzoning the whole city. It shouldn't just be transit corridors that get upzoned. So we will be doing that citywide so that there's an opportunity for people to live in all of the neighborhoods in our community. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh, I have to click the other buttons. So, but beyond private development, the city also believes that the city should be a player in helping provide housing to the community. And so, especially when it comes to affordable housing, voters in Emeryville approved Measure C in 2018. The city council supported. It was a ballot measure that provided a $50 million affordable housing bond, which is leveraged against the assessed value of properties in the city. And to give you an idea of the scale of the significance of that $50 million investment for a 1 square mile city of 12,000 people, San Francisco's affordable housing bond was 600 million, which is 12 times our bond, but Emeryville's population is 65 times smaller. So if it gives you an idea of the scale and magnitude of what our residents committed to. And we developed, with that authority, we developed an affordable housing expenditure plan that we used the community to help us develop where that $50 million would be expended, how it would be used to generate additional affordable housing opportunities across our city, and ways in which the community could be engaged in ensuring that we house all people equitably. So the city has a couple other features related to affordable housing. We have a BMR home ownership program where there are about 250 condos, townhouses, and single family homes that the city purchased during the redevelopment era. And we use those combined with a combination of tenant protections, anti-harassment, and just cause eviction ordinances that we have in the city to ensure that we do placekeeping for working and low income people in our city. And those have combined been an effective tool for us to develop meaningful housing for our residents. So just to give you a couple examples of how this works. So just in the last couple of years, at the bottom there is the Estrella Vista property. That's 87 units of low and very low income housing, mostly 2 to 4 bedrooms for families who are very low income households. And the city in that case provided a no interest $4 million loan in the land that the project was built on for that housing opportunity to take place. In 2020, at the top, you have the Nelly Gateway Hannon project. That project has been permitted and will be in construction soon. It got SB 35 ministerial approval. The city gave $16 million to help provide funding for that. And just this past week, the State Strategic Growth Council gave it an additional $10 million in funding because of the city's support. This project will have 25% of its units will be permanent supportive housing for the homeless, and the rest of them will be low income housing. And that site is currently the home of the Emeryville Citizen Assistance Program, which is a food and homeless care services provider. And we are going to move them indoors to this building with a full dining room and kitchen when the building opens. And then one that's a personal favorite of mine, 4300 San Pablo, is a project that we are in an agreement with EAH Housing to build. It will provide about 70 units of housing. And this will be one of the first projects in California that will be an intergenerationally provided housing project. So the law in California previously did not allow for tax financing of intergenerational projects, and the city council sponsored Senate Bill 591 this past year to make that tax credit possibility legal. And so this project will have 80% of its units will be for seniors, and 20% of its units will be for homeless and foster age youth who are transitioning out of services, so that we can help line up good social health and wellness opportunities for everybody. And so what has all this led to? Well, we have been named one of the most YIMBY city councils. We get labeled lots of things, but the reality is that we are one of the few cities that's actually surpassing housing goals and providing housing at a much greater, faster clip than everybody else. And that's necessary to creating a more people-oriented space. Next is community benefits agreements. So we just have a few slides left. Community benefits agreements. So there's a lot of private development that's not residential that comes into the community, and there are opportunities to leverage that to make more people-oriented spaces. So what you see on here is one rendition of 2 of the 4 buildings that will be in the 12-acre campus of the Pacific Gateway Life Sciences Center that Biomed Realty has purchased and is in the process of constructing right now. And through the Biomed process, this process, the city was able to leverage out of it through our community benefits program, which is again listed in our development regulations and just a standard requirement we require of developers. They have to provide money equal to a certain percentage of construction value for projects, and the city has a series of options for where they can invest that. That includes net zero energy projects, utility and undergrounding, open space, community parks, transportation, public works, or small business programs. And so in this case, there will be traffic diverters and a whole block closure along a bike boulevard to remove vehicles from biking alongside this project. It will also include elevated bike lanes, which will be curbside running and at the same height as the sidewalk, to take bicyclists out of the street and remove the opportunity for people to park in bike lanes that will be used. And they're going to close an existing private street that was set to be reopened and turn it into a pedestrian walking plaza instead, which will be connected further to our Emeryville Greenway as an extension of it. Just a couple other examples. The Wareham Emery Center Overland project is currently being reviewed, and one of the things the City Council has asked for as part of the community benefits program is that they close a different block of Overland Street, which is also a bike boulevard, to traffic, where it will have bike ped movement pass through, picnic area, pedestrian spaces, but it will again remove vehicles, largely as we learned from Doyle Street, from our bike boulevards and calm them significantly by not allowing through car movement through this space. And Wareham is actually also offered to upgrade our current flex bollards that run down the majority of Horton Street's bike lanes and put in full curbs that separate the bike lanes from the travel lanes of vehicles as part of their contribution to the city through their community benefits agreement. And then last one that I'm really proud of. Before I was elected to the City Council, I was a member of a resident group that negotiated with Lennar Multifamily. And this project here, which you see is in mid-construction, The 45th Street Bike Boulevard dead ends into the old Sherwin-Williams Paint Factory building, which is being repurposed. And the agreement requires that the center piece that you see of this building here will be a full bike lane pass through the building, and it will enter into the city park on the other side. And the ones on the side of it, on each side, will be pedestrian pass. So we'll actually cut a hole through the middle of an existing building to allow and prioritize bike and pedestrian movement from an existing bike boulevard to a city park. So last couple slides, socioeconomic opportunity is really important. And in Emeryville, it's not hidden for those who are from California. We really prioritize this. So Emeryville has been a leader on elevating wages and opportunities for working people. And this is really important to people-centric communities, because if we believe equitability is a goal of a people-centric community and that everybody should have the opportunity and advantage of living in a community like ours, then we have to lift everybody up. Creating great free transit is one way of helping make it possible for everyone to participate. Building tons of affordable housing and mixed income housing is another opportunity for us to really game change. But truthfully, in the end, you still have to close the gap with wages and other worker protections. And so Emeryville has, I hate to say it, no longer the highest minimum wage. West Hollywood just approved a minimum wage that's like 10 cents higher than ours. But ours goes up every July 1st. So we'll see you in July, West Hollywood. But we have been supporting workers. We have actually, as part of our active transit plan update, we actually we do a lot of analysis on equity. And so we actually tracked where do workers live. And so as part of our analysis, we studied where do the lower income workers in our community live. And what we found is a lot of them live in Emeryville. But what it taught us was where people come from, and it taught us what kind of barriers people have or face in coming to our community. So when we think about opportunities for spot improvements, intersection design review, chances to put in the new bike lane, when it comes to prioritization of where to do our investments or what policies would be most beneficial, looking at what people are already doing, where they can afford to live in our city, how they commute, what their commute looks like, and which routes they're taking, allows us to develop a more equitable transportation plan that will serve them equitably. And then it's about reaching everybody. And so our city has been on the front line of trying to be a regional partner. We're a really small city, so it'd be foolish for us to ignore the fact that we need to be part of a regional team in developing solutions to the problems that face us. And there's fewer problems that are rooted in racial injustice, socioeconomic inequity, and housing affordability than homelessness. And the city of Emeryville has been partners with their neighboring cities. And a couple of years ago, I'm very proud that we partnered with the city of Oakland, and we took a temporary rec center we had been using to provide rec services to our students while we were rebuilding our high school. And after the students had moved back in, the building has been sitting vacant. We offered it to the city of Oakland to give them a head start in opening their family front door program, which moved 25 homeless families from Oakland into Emeryville at no cost to the city of Oakland. So these are ways in which socioeconomic opportunities, and those same people benefited from getting services from our city, riding our transit, being able to apply for housing in our community, and being able to apply for and get jobs at any of the places in our city more meaningfully. Okay, and then last but not least on this this line of policy ideas is racial justice. So racial justice has got to be a necessary and spoken part of any people-oriented plan to make communities more people-centric. We've already discussed deliver on racial justice to our community. We talked about placekeeping. We have tenant protections, affordable housing production, free and equitable transit access, and higher wages for people. But additionally, the city supports nonprofit programs like ECAP, which you see up there, which is feeds 200,000 meals to people who are homeless or hungry in Alameda County every year. The city is one of just a few in the county, in the state actually, that has a city-run childcare. So working and low-income residents or workers have the ability to access affordable childcare for their families when they come to our city. And this is particularly removing a burden for women of color who are often the most hampered by policies that don't support them in this respect. Other African-American and minority-owned businesses have reported that they have loved doing business in Emeryville. They feel supported by the city of Emeryville. We prioritized during COVID and repurposed, for example, a $250,000 grant program we usually do to give facade improvements to small businesses. We turned it into a small business grant program to help minority business owners survive COVID. and the county matched that program. So we basically, we leveraged our own funding to provide twice as level of resources to our minority business owners, which helped many of them survive the first hard year of the COVID pandemic. And then there's also just, I threw out here a couple small things that cities can do related to policies. So I was kind of aghast to learn that the city has a bicycle license requirement and a registration requirement. And these were traditionally rooted in the 60s and 70s and tied to essentially the over policing of Black and brown children, who it was used as a pretense to stop people. And even though our city doesn't enforce this today, the vestiges of this remaining in the municipal code are a reminder that cities have a long way to go before we fully root out these types of problems. I'm happy to report that our transportation committee has recommended a repeal of this entire chapter, and it will go before our city council in a few months. And alternatives exist to using police and law enforcement to protect bicycles and pedestrians. Bike Index, for example, is a nonprofit that allows you to register your bike, and the city is examining opportunities to partner with nonprofits like this to keep law enforcement resources in places where they're most useful and not in the space of people-oriented and people-centric mobility. Lastly, one of the things we changed, used to be in our city that a police officer would pull you over if you did not have a bike light on. And I'm really proud that 10 years later, our police officers now actually hand out bike lights to people. And there's an education and encouragement platform over an enforcement mentality. All right, so what happens at the end? Well, when you do all those things, you get to leverage all those pieces and get outcomes. And so this is just one example. This past week, as I mentioned, the Strategic Growth Council of California gave us a $20 million grant, which 90 units of affordable housing, 25% of them being permanent supportive housing, will get 10 million of that. We will be contributing a new BART car train to the regional transportation system, and our 40th Street design, which I haven't even told you about, which is to remove parking along the entire 40th Street, our largest east-west corridor other than Powell, will become a two-way cycle track, and one travel lane in each direction will become a transit only or transit priority lane. So we have $4 million to start construction of that project. And then just planning for more change. So this is just a map of our city through its active transportation plan, and we're actively engaged in working with community stakeholders to, oops, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. We're actively working with community stakeholders and others to develop positive change opportunities for our community. And the last thing I'll just say, I mean, I'm at time, so I want to make sure I stop on time. But last thing I just want to say is that, I ran for office because I wanted to make a positive change in my own community. And I had a vision for a more inclusive, people-oriented space where you couldn't just belong, but you could actually thrive. And as an elected official, I try to live my authentic self. If you follow me on Twitter, I live my authentic self at all times. And my agenda is really simple. If you do things that create joy for others, you'll often find joy in yourself. So that's kind of the goal here. And I really think that we need more leaders who are unapologetically willing to create people-oriented spaces where you can experience your own version of joy in this world. And I just appreciate everyone listening to this presentation. And so I will officially say thank you.